After a bitter 4-day battle east of Berlin, Soviet forces have finally broken through the city's outer defenses. South of the city, Marshal Konev's tank columns are approaching the Teltow Canal and the suburb of Potsdam. At the same time, Marshal Zhukov's forces are striking past the city to the north and pushing into the eastern suburbs. Only 6 weeks earlier, Hitler had ordered an extensive network of defenses to be built in the city. Soviet troops are to be held up by minefields and trench systems and channeled into killing zones. Barricades and gun positions are to cover every street. But short of time and lacking manpower and resources, the defenses are half built and there are only 41,000 men in the garrison. Most are policemen, old men formed into a home guard called the Volkssturm, and teenage boys from the Hitler Youth like Wolfgang Urbanski.
Also haben wir uns erstmal alle eingekleidet, richtig eingekleidet.
For the first time, we were properly outfitted with uniforms and equipment.
Und dann,
I looked just like Rambo.
und dann naja, ich sah aus.
On my left and right, I had egg grenades,
Original.
stick grenades,
Links und rechts.
2 pistols, and naturally, most important of all, my machine
Und
gun.
natürlich mein Maschinengewehr. Das war wichtig.
By 7 p.m. on day 6, the Red Army has reached the Teltow Canal on the southern border of Berlin. Only 40 yards of water lies between its tanks and the center of Hitler's capital city. But reinforcements arrive for the Berlin defenses just in time. Driven back into the city by Zhukov's forces are the units which held out so long at Salo Heights. These 45,000 troops now become the backbone of the defense. They bring with them just 60 tanks to hold back the masses of Soviet armor. As the Soviet ring of steel closes around Berlin, the Nazi warlords realize that their world has ended. But Hitler refuses to leave the doomed city. In his bunker deep beneath the Reichschancellery, he issues orders to phantom armies and demands suicidal attacks by his exhausted soldiers.
The scene in the Führer bunker is an almost comical scene of French farce, with doors opening and closing and people slipping into rooms and negotiating and sneaking out and sneaking back in. And the only steady thing in the world of the Führer bunker is that madman in the center of it, Hitler himself, getting steadily less rational, steadily losing contact with reality.
While Konev prepares to cross the Teltow Canal in the south, Zhukov's armies begin to push in from the east and southeast. Stalin now sets a boundary between the two marshals' lines of advance, but stops it short of the city center. There, the ruined parliament building, the Reichstag, will be their target, the symbolic heart of Hitler's Germany. Both marshals are determined that their troops will be the ones to plant the red flag on its roof. Under cover of a massive bombardment, Konev's infantry storms across the Teltow Canal. But in this sector, the old men of the Volkssturm are backed up by regular troops. The first bridgeheads are wiped out by ferocious counterattacks. By midday, Konev's tanks are fighting their way through the maze of buildings on the north bank. Further east, Zhukov's men are also advancing. But here the defenders are SS troops. They fight back fanatically. German aid stations are overwhelmed by the flood of wounded. For 16-year-old Gisela Stenger, it is a nightmare experience.
Of course, I wasn't a trained nurse. But I ran around and helped to hold an arm or leg that was being put in plaster or amputated. The blood was running down the stairs, and I was told to get a cloth to wipe it up so that no one would see it. Naturally, it all affected me very deeply. I hadn't always bothered before, but now when I went to sleep at night, I started to pray again.
Fighting every step of the way, the German defenders in the south and east pull back toward the center of Berlin. But on April 25th comes the news that the people of Berlin have been dreading. 15 miles west of the city, the armies of Zhukov and Konev have linked up after sweeping north and south right around the city. Berlin is surrounded. There is no escape for the desperate garrison and the city's inhabitants. But some are determined to fight on. And in the rubble-choked streets of Berlin, Soviet tanks will go from being the hunters to the hunted. April 26, 1945, day 10 of the Battle of Berlin. The capital city of Nazi Germany has been completely surrounded by the Red Army. The final Soviet drive to crush the city is about to begin. But first, troops from Marshal Ivan Konev's army group head for Torgau, 75 miles southwest of the river Elbe. There they come face to face with advancing units of the U.S. First Army. Both sides celebrate the fact that the Third Reich has been cut in two. But for the Soviet High Command, the link-up means more than just the final days of the Third Reich. Soviet troops spread north along the Elbe, facing the Americans, and block the way to Berlin. Stalin is at last satisfied that there is now no way the Allies can reach the city.
The Western Allies, although they had a perfectly clear run at Berlin, and an awful lot of Germans would much rather have surrendered to a British, American, or French officer as opposed to waiting to be carted off to the Gulag by a Red Army officer. Well, they didn't have the chance. The Western Allies stop on the line of the river Elbe and allow the Soviets a clear run at Berlin.
More than 460,000 Soviet troops, 3,000 guns and mortars, and 1,500 tanks and self-propelled guns were now ready and waiting for the final assault on the heart of Berlin. And in the sky overhead, Soviet reconnaissance aircraft play a vital role in charting their army's progress toward the heart of the city.
We would look at a map and we'd say, this territory is already ours. And the commander would shape it in pencil. And this is also ours, but here there's still some resistance. So we need to detail a unit to take that house. That was how we operated.
In the east, Zhukov's men push forward along the river Spree, leading to the heart of the city. In the south, they burst from the bridgeheads over the Teltow Canal and in vicious fighting capture Tempelhof Airport. The city's last link with the rest of Germany has been severed. The German defenders break up into small groups as they are driven back to the central defense zone. The last 8 SS Tiger tanks take position around the Tiergarten Park. Their deadly 88mm guns control the approaches to the Reichstag. But as dawn breaks, Soviet commanders become frustrated by their troops' slow progress. When tanks try to penetrate the maze of rubble-filled streets, they are easy prey for the fanatical tank-hunting teams of SS and Hitler Youth.
There were young boys, old people, all of them armed with Panzerfausts. Panzerfausts were incredibly dangerous for tanks. You could stand behind the corner and fire it, and that was the end of the tank. It would just burst into flames.
The penetrating power was incredible.
Die Panzerfaust schweißt ja
The
alles.
Panzerfaust just sliced through everything.
Relativ treffsicher.
And it was relatively accurate and so simple that anyone could use it.
Konnte jeder bedienen.
It was guaranteed to punch through iron and steel and explode inside.
Explodiert denn innen drin, ne?
In command of the force pushing north toward the Reichstag is General Vasily Chuikov, defender of Stalingrad. He now orders his troops to adopt the street fighting tactics developed in that terrible battle.